What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is sponsored by TonaLaw. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. TonaLaw is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out TonaLaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. This episode is also brought to you by Meet Gabby, the voice AI built for law firms. Gabby answers your phones 24/7, qualifies leads, and books consultations so you never miss another client. Imagine cutting intake time in half or giving every caller a 5-star experience. That's the power of Meet Gabby. Learn more at meetgabby.com. Mention the Lead Counsel Podcast. You can also hit me up, and I'm glad to make an introduction to the owner. I am here with John Hawkins, Ed Alexander, and Daniel Feiman, succession planning extraordinaire by these three gentlemen. So today I want to jump into specifically, we left off the last episode, which was mindset, right? Overcoming resistance and difficult conversations. And specifically, you guys moving people towards what is good for them, right? So my first question would be, why is there so much internal resistance to this among lawyers and experts? Dan told, just for the people that are just tuning in, a sad story. Your grandfather, right, Dan?
Yes.
Estate planning attorney, 5 bypasses, passes away in his 80s, no estate plan. Like, I'll bleep this out, but what in the actual goes through people's minds when they are the estate planning experts and they don't do the planning? So guys, help me wrap my head around, and every listener that's listening, it won't be me, but I'll do it tomorrow. What's with the internal resistance? How do we just get people better at this? In the law, let's talk specifically lawyers. So whoever wants to jump in and take it, because Dan, you've been working on planning with lawyers. I know I'm a challenge, but I'm going to put that out there. And John and Ed, I mean, that's your whole practice, is dealing with lawyers and law firms.
I think there are lots of things that go into the mindset. I do think with lawyers, part of it is what is the old Eisenhower matrix, or the urgent, important, whatever. I think lawyers are putting out fires all day. They're just overwhelmed. They always think, get to it tomorrow. And then tomorrow happens, and then boom, 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 boom. They can't get to it. And they just won't do it. I mean, I know personally, I think I may have told the story last time, on my personal estate plan, it took me 10 years and 3 different lawyers from start to finish. And the only reason we signed was we were leaving, going out of the country. And we were like, all right, we'd better sign this the day before. So I get it.
I mean, just personally, before I let you guys jump in, I did my estate plan 3 years ago now. And Ed, you know my estate planning lawyer. I may have introduced you to her, Dan. Fiona out of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I still have yet to fund any of the trusts that she formed. And I just keep saying to my wife, just get her the list of assets. They'll do the rest. Just get her the list of assets, including the firm, right? Like, I want all of this structured in a way that I was very fortunate when my father passed away, because he listened to me and set up the trust. But like any good Italian, he didn't trust anybody, so he didn't put anything into the trust. But when he passed away, my mother said, just handle it. And my brother and I put everything into the trust. So there's no probate to be had. There's no hassle. Everything's kind of laid out in the paperwork. So go ahead, Ed and Dan, I think you guys were going to jump into like the internal resistance and overcoming it. Whether you think about the successful transactions you've done and why they went so smoothly or whatever, how do we get lawyers to a better place with all of this, where it becomes kind of just good business practice to do this?
Yeah. I would say the motivating factor is fear. And Jonathan's is a perfect example because the fear of dying in a plane crash without one overcame the fear of actually doing it, right? And so ultimately that's what it is get over your fear or create another fear that's bigger, right? Because all of a sudden you get motivation when something worse might happen, right? That's why I really think it's fear of the future. Like, oh, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for decades. What am I going to do if I'm not a lawyer? And this brings that to the fore. Plus, there's also the component of, I know what I'm doing as a lawyer. I can do this. I do it every day, all day long, every day. This is totally foreign to me. And instead of me being in charge and me being the guy that people come to for answers, I got to go to somebody else for the answers. And that's an uncomfortable position for me to be in. And so I think you add all of that together and it really does create this massive amount of resistance to getting it done.
Yeah.
Can't disagree with anything you guys have said, but I'll add something else to it. Too often, I'll use an attorney that Tom and I know. I worked with this attorney. What they said literally when we start was, I'm ready. When you recognize you're ready, this process becomes much easier. As you said, Ed, too often we are afraid, what the heck are we going to do when we're not the center of attention, when we're not the go-to expert? So an example is a good friend of mine spent 1.5 years planning his retirement so that he wouldn't have second thoughts. So he wouldn't say, gee, I've got to go back into practice, etc. So part of our transition tool is we sit down with the attorneys and say, okay, what do you want to do? Where do you want to give back? What else do we not know about you that you can do later? Getting someone comfortable, I don't want to use the term the afterlife, but after we're no longer an attorney, there's teaching, there's pro bono, there's millions of things depending on what you want. But until someone sits you down and takes you through that process, until you answer those difficult questions, that fear that Ed talks about is going to stand in the way of just over 50% of attorneys. We'll get to it after I put out all the fires as the other 51%. So now we're over 100%. So there's no way to get to it because there's too many other priorities.
So again, you deal with this reluctance or this kind of head in the sand mentality. And again, there's also a pessimism out there too, because there's a sector of lawyers that some of us know that are like, oh, this is all BS. There's no successful succession planning. You just close up shop. You disseminate the files. But, I can just speak to one that Dan and I know very well. But I mean, give us something positive. Talk about succession planning that you've seen go really well with high ticket. And I'm talking north of $5 million exits for owners. Like, is that something that's pie in the sky, never happens, or have you guys seen it?
So without getting into detail, last year I was on the acquiring side of a significant 8-figure transition, and it wasn't even for the full firm.
Wow. Oh, so you weren't buying, you were in the transaction.
I represented the buyer.
Gotcha. Okay. You were the buyer's attorney.
So the seller got a significant multiple 8-figure check.
Wow. Multiple 8 figures. That's sexy. That's what I want.
And it wasn't even the whole firm.
Dan, that's what I want, Dan. That's what I want.
I'm writing it down, Tom. We're going to put it into your strategic plan.
But it wasn't just a one-off, John. You've been in other transactions like this.
That's the biggest one I personally been in, but there are others that I am aware of, but was not personally involved in.
But multiple 7-figure exit ones you've seen.
Oh yeah. I mean,
you guys are all shaking your heads. So let's talk about that stuff, because the fear stuff, maybe that motivates people, maybe it doesn't. But to me, the fear of having something of that kind of significant value and not monetizing it, at least for my heirs or for my family or for charity or whatever, that seems more tragic than anything, right? Like, we freaking put our blood, sweat, and tears into building these practices. So give me some more of those wins where you've closed these transactions. Dan, you're smiling. I know of one specifically, but talk about more. And we're talking about north of 5 million. You're talking about more than 10 million in that one transaction. Ed, you got any stories like that?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points I want to make on that. The first is on those deals, I see the likelihood of doing an internal transfer much, much greater than doing an external transfer because there's a pretty limited pool of buyers for an external transfer. So it's essential that you've got your internal set up. And I've been involved in several of those internal transfers, basically setting up the partnership that's going to turn into the acquisition, right? And so putting that in place, that's really more likely to occur, certainly, than in the smaller deals, the sub 5 million, where you've got 1 or 2 people coming in to take over a single founder.
Okay.
And Tom, you and I are intimately familiar with a particular transaction where I was introduced to one of the 2 partners. They were definitely ready to go. They had a game plan in mind. It took 6 months, believe it or not. This is how well the firm was already structured to go through the process of building out the succession plan, looking at the actual valuation, negotiating an acquisition of 50% of this firm. And the attorney walked away with exactly what they wanted. It was truly a win-win, but they were prepared psychologically. They knew they wanted to be out relatively soon. So we took them through the process, and it was very successful. In fact, I continued to work with the buyer when they came into the firm and worked with the firm for a couple of years on some additional issues for their succession for the new partner as well as the existing partner to take that firm further.
That's okay. Awesome. Go ahead, John. You were going to say something?
I was going to say one other thing I'll throw in the mix. We may have mentioned this last time. I know Ed and I had a long conversation about this, but institutional money is here, whether it's private equity or whatever you want to call it, family offices, they are here knocking on the doors. And so you're going to see more and more and more roll-ups where they're buying a bunch of firms and maybe doing multiple exits. And so that's another, you can bemoan it all you want.
I'm not bemoaning it. I actually,
the people out there, some people, it's very divisive out there, but it's coming, it's here. You might as well set yourself up.
So let's talk about that. I sent a text message to somebody on Friday night because a lot of PI firms are in the same space right now. We're trying to figure out bigger, smaller, whatever. And I said, what if we went out to Arizona, formed an ABS, alternative business structure, and then bought our practices for $1? TonaLaw, your firm. What are you laughing at, Ed?
Well, I'm laughing because Jonathan and I just had about an hour conversation about this on the podcast. It'll be released soon on Law Deals.
Oh, all right. Okay.
But there's a whole host of issues that come up with that. I'm happy to describe any of the issues that come up from that. But I will tell you that so far, Texas has decided that that's verboten, right? So
in North Carolina, I found out. So one of the firms that we were looking at was my friend. You guys know this guy. We've had dinner with him together, all of us, but at different times. And I may have introduced you to him, Dan. But his firm's in North Carolina. I was like, what if we just buy TonaLaw, buy your firm? Now we're double the size and we're going just faster. And his son, who's his financial guy, wrote back and said, I got an opinion from the bar. And all it said, one sentence, this is not legal in North Carolina. That was it. Now, I think that's going to change. I do think it's going to change. But is it do you find jurisdictionally they're trying to block that right now in a lot of jurisdictions?
I would say, the devil's in the details. It definitely depends on how it's structured. There are ways that are technically within the rules that you can structure these things. Ed and I had this long conversation about it. That said, there may be some activist regulators out there in certain jurisdictions that say, technically that's okay, but the spirit of the rule is being broken and we're not going to let you do it. So there's always that risk out there. Nothing is 100%, but there are ways, I think, to structure these things.
Yeah, look, there are firms that are in all 50 states. They figured it out, right? Whether it's a standalone office in North Carolina, they're the same name, right? I don't know how they're structuring it, but my head's always thinking about, okay, what's the next opportunity / iteration of that?
Well, I was just saying, if you have a private equity fund full of just law firm or lawyer participants, then technically it's a lawyer-owned law firm, right?
Right. Well, you know what? It's funny that you say that because the other guy was a lawyer, right, that I sent the text message to, and he's got a North Carolina license. So what's to stop us from forming that parent structure? So you're saying that there might be ways to work around their blanket one sentence, you can't do this in North Carolina thing.
Well, Tom, I think what's different is that what you're talking about is what's called an interstate law firm, right? I think of the larger law firms, a Baker, Hostetler, or somebody like that. They have offices in multiple states. They operate under one name, but they have admitted lawyers in each jurisdiction that are equity partners and that manage those offices. And so that's really changes the tenor of what you're talking about. The real issue is when you have a non-attorney in the mix. That throws everything off.
Well, I just saw a marketing guy, I won't mention his name, but he put it out on LinkedIn, who decided he was going to go in and form a law firm in Arizona. He had this locked up website. He partnered with a law firm, and now they're cashing in on these brain damage cases that they're pulling in from all 50 states. I'm like, I guess there's a way to figure it out where there's money, like where the money will flow, the answers will come, I guess. Quick break to thank Meet Gabby, the voice AI that answers your phone, screen leads, and books consults 24/7. They'll even send out retainers if the person on the other end of the phone asks for a retainer. If intake is slowing you down, check out meetgabby.com. This episode is supported by TonaLaw, a modern law firm built on integrity and innovation. Learn how they're changing the game at TonaLaw.com. Attorney referrals accepted from across the country. You'll see what it's like when you send us a case. You'll have some happy clients. So, because you brought it up, John, private equity money's going to come in. It's going to come. It's already here. One, how are they finding the deals? And two, because Dan's got some experience in this space too, are these deals going to be enticing to firm owners, or are they going to do what private equity normally does, which is grab as much money off the table as possible, leave some meat on the bone, maybe if you're lucky, and have lawyers that are still anchored to their firm for the next 20 years?
Well, a lot of questions there. I'd say I personally have not seen any of these deals actually close yet. I have heard about some that have. So I've seen sort of to the LOI stage, and then it just hasn't closed yet, at least the ones I personally have seen. Are they going to work? Is everyone going to be happy on the other side? It's too soon to decide. It's too early. We shall see if people actually are happy with it or not. I do know on sort of in the accounting world, they're further along the path. And in the medical field, they're further along the path. And I think if you were on the older side that had the exits, I think they're all pretty happy. It's the younger people that maybe aren't as happy.
It's the remainders that got to put in X number of prescribed hours at X profitability. And they got these hedge fund formulas for now turning out veterinary work or even dental work. But I mean, look, in the dental space, right? I could talk to you about an experience as a client. I went to a practice that got bought over by something across America or whatever. And literally the woman who's a hygienist, like, you have like 30 cavities. I'm like, well, that's ironic because the dentist in the other room has been my dentist since I'm a kid. I want to see him. Now she's like poking holes in my teeth, my gums. The dentist comes in. Now he's an old timer. He's long since died. I said, dude, what the holy hell? 30 cavities? Like, I'm meticulous with my teeth. He looks in my mouth. He goes, nah, dude, you got nothing. You're good. Go home. So again, you can see the concerns, but I think it's too late. That genie's out of the bottle. The money's going to swing. The laws are going to change. It's going to change to accommodate it, I think. But, you bring up an interesting thing from a succession planning standpoint. It just becomes another option in my head, as one of the older guys that wants to reap the benefits of the exit. Right, to me. But Dan, what's your experience with these alternative business structures and hedge funds?
Well, ABS, I'm not familiar with. The hedge funds, the venture capitalists, the private equity. You've got to run your practice like a lean, mean, real business. So looking at your firm like it's a law firm that isn't a business is strike number one. It's not going to work. They're looking for the most efficient firm. Now, in some cases, they're looking for particular niches to bolt on. We want to put this firm with this firm with this firm. But you've got to run a lean, efficient law firm, number one. Number two, if you're not ready to use this as your exit strategy, if you're going to hang out for a while, you may find that some of the requirements and restrictions for you to get your payday are beyond onerous. And when you have responsibility for areas that you don't have authority to control, You get only the downside of the situation. The third point to keep in mind is most PE transactions come in where you're not going to get everything that's promised to you up front. You're going to get the second bite of the apple, which is you got to leave in 10, 20% of what we're going to pay you, and we're going to put that in to the next acquisition, and that's when you're going to get your big payday. So it's those three ingredients make that a very different way to go about it. It's a much longer play. It's a much more stressful play than just selling your firm to another firm. It can work. It can work to get you a bigger payday. But like anything else, risk is proportional to return. Are you willing to jump through those additional hoops for that additional time to get that additional dollar?
And does it always go that way? Like, is every transaction with private equity going to have that kicker?
If it were up to the private equity firms,
oh yeah,
absolutely.
Right,
It depends on how aggressive and how successful you are as a negotiator, how much they want.
Gotcha.
I would add something to remember too. Private equity has lots of money that they have to deploy, and they have to get a return on that money. So they're not looking at these smaller firms, right? And if you're a $5 million firm or above, that's the kind of platform that they'll be looking for. Now, they may add on smaller firms, but certainly north of seven figures, right? They're not going to go down into the six or anything like that, and probably not below five. It's occasional that they might do that. So for the vast majority of firms, it's really not an option for them.
Right. As somebody who has a lot of interest in this, how do the private equity guys get matched up with the law firm owners that they should be talking to?
Well, I've been approached for firms that we have listed. And so we go through the marketing process and they find us. Several firms, private equity firms, I've talked to about listings that we have. So
any of those move to transaction?
No.
Okay.
They have people out there cold calling firms.
Just going through the internet.
Cold DMs. I've had people emailing me about my firm.
I get them all the time, but I don't know if they're like scams. They're like, hey, we're interested in buying your firm. I never heard of the company before. I'm like, I don't know if it's a scam or not.
Business brokers get them all the time. Private equity sends you email all the time when you're a licensed business broker, and they ask, what do you have in? I mean, typically it's like, hey, we're looking for $3 million of EBITDA, and in these 5 different business categories, do you have anything listed? We'd like to take a look at it. And they hire newly minted MBAs to go out and do all of that cold calling work to bring them deals.
Wow. Well, look, I think it's interesting. And also, like in your line of business in Arizona, forget which organization it is, they have the business of law coming up in November. I'm not sure if I can make it because I got to be down. I'm doing the Atticus thing for an AI company, most likely. But they have an alternative business structured day out in Arizona, which given your chosen fields, I don't know if you guys plan on attending that or do you ever do that, Ed?
No, I'm going to be at the Atticus Summit.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, good. Then I'll probably see you there. John, have you ever done that?
I wasn't planning on it.
Okay.
I mean, I could spend the next 3 months doing nothing but conferences. So I got to pick and choose.
I know. Well, I'm just, again, I find the whole entry of private money into this fascinating. So talk to me about targets. I think it was you, Dan, that said it's efficient. So let's talk about this. Top line growth, bottom line growth. And lawyers don't talk in EBITDA. Lawyers talk in profit, right? They say gross, they say net. The net's the profit. No one talks about EBITDA. I know what it is, but just let's use profit for a second. What kind of numbers are realistic but attractive for a buyer to look at in terms of growth numbers on an annual basis? I've heard different numbers, and Dan, I think I've even talked to you about them, but I'd be curious to see what your take is.
Well, I think the numbers that you had thrown out in our conversation last week was 2020. Top line growth, 20% a year compound, and bottom line growth, 20% a year. It's pretty unusual to see firms have 20% growth, either top or bottom line, consistently on a compounded basis, because mathematically that gets pretty tough. But what a firm is looking for, going back to the private equity, is they want to see consistent, sustainable growth. They want to see margins at or above, and again, on a consistent basis, what the peer group is producing. And there's plenty of information out there, public information, on firm size and their numbers. You can go to RMA, for example, and you can pick any industry in the world, and you can get comparative data almost instantly. Ed, because of the valuation side of his practice, he's got access to numbers that nobody else does.
You
Okay.
pay for that access.
Oh, I'm
So Ed, I'm really quick. So Ed, because I've talked about this with Dan, if somebody wanted an evaluation, could you do evaluation for firms across the country?
Yeah, what we do is a pricing opinion, right? Because if you're looking for a full-blown appraisal, right? So you got 3 levels of appraisal. Full-blown appraisal is the big guy. Pricing opinion's the bottom, right? And so most lawyers want pricing opinions because they just want a ballpark where they're at and where they're going. You pay for a full-blown appraisal, you're well into 5 figures to pay for that appraisal. So, yeah, so we'll do pricing opinions across the country.
Okay. So again, one tip from each of you about how to have this hard conversation with, let's say for a second, you've gotten over the resistance, the planning is there. Now you've got a buyer or a seller and you got to just have that difficult conversation about the realities, right? The realities of what you're looking at. How do you have those conversations? Let's say you're a buyer, you're looking to buy and you're talking to a seller. How do you move from the concept of I have this desire to do this to closing a multi-8-figure transaction like John or a multiple 7-figure transaction like I'm familiar with Dan or you've done, Ed? How do you move it past the I want to do this to the it's done, it's papered up, one person's sold, one person bought, and we're good?
There's about 100 steps along the way. Everybody has to be committed. And because and so we always want to make sure that you're committed before we start really getting into that process, right? And so it begins with the meeting, then it gets to letter of intent paper, then we do some due diligence, then we go to contract, then we go to lending, then, right? So all throughout this process. So it's a months long process, not 1 month, months, plural, long process. And along the way, people will get mad at one another. They'll get mad at their lawyers. They'll get mad at the other side's lawyers. And there'll be an emotional roller coaster that goes on. And then eventually, if everybody is really committed to it, we'll sit around a table, we'll sign documents, and we'll close the deal.
So it does happen, right? So
Absolutely.
Look, I got to move this into more concrete. As somebody who wants to buy now and potentially sell later, or maybe after I talk to Dan one more time, I sell now. I don't know. But you got to tune in next time for that. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Go anywhere podcasts are distributed. Follow us. Leave us a 10-star review. Share some episodes with your friends. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. This episode is sponsored by TonaLaw. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. TonaLaw is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out TonaLaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. This episode is also brought to you by Meet Gabby, the voice AI built for law firms. Gabby answers your phones 24/7, qualifies leads, and books consultations so you never miss another client. Imagine cutting intake time in half while giving every caller a 5-star experience. That's the power of Meet Gabby. Learn more at meetgabby.com. Mention the Lead Counsel Podcast. You can also hit me up, and I'm glad to make an introduction to the owner.